Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome back. Do you realize that in just a couple episodes, we will be at number 50 podcast episodes for The Aligned Self? Can you imagine 50 episodes? So I ask you the question, have you listened to all of them yet? Seriously, I've put a lot of work in all these. These are, hours behind the microphone. But, please select and go to the ones that you're drawn to. And I just want to remind you that if you're new to the podcast, that the first series, the first several episodes are entirely around intuition, intuitive guidance, psychic ability. Because I think the number one skill that we can develop is listening to our inner guidance, following our bliss, listening to our heart, tuning into that intuitive wisdom. And very soon I will be re-releasing my course, the Intuition Course, a training program in developing and deepening your intuition, your psychic guidance, to where you can experience it as a bona fide skill, a resource that you can go to again and again, instead of something that comes and goes like the wind. And I have to be honest, at this point in my life, I can hardly imagine not having the ability to see around corners, to see what just lies ahead, or feel or interpret the energy that's going on. It baffles my mind, and I realized that there was a point in time where I did not access my intuition all that much. I made a lot of mistakes. I took a lot of detours because I was, sourcing my life from the wrong guidance or the wrong source. I was working from my ego and not what was most aligned to my development, most aligned to my personal growth. Yet in retrospect, everything was working for me. Everything was working on my behalf. So if you think you're interested in getting involved in the Intuition Course, go to yesdaniel.com and follow the link, which you'll either find a placeholder for a wait list, so you'll be notified as soon as it comes up and it is available. You'll also have access to special pricing or a special bonus that's available because you're on the wait list, or there'll be a link where you can actually get happily involved right away. But in this episode, I do want to piggyback on the episode just before this when I talked about breakthroughs and breakdowns, how everything is working out for you. And it's part of the process. It's part of the program. And unfortunately, many times we're not aware that we created an intention, a goal, a new idea, a new way of being that we wanted to step into, and we weren't yet aligned with it. So that's what happened to me over the last couple of weeks. I created the intention around energy, having a new relationship with energy. And like I said in that earlier podcast, everything is energy. And so our relationship to energy is everything. And what I was declaring is that the relationship that I currently had wasn't where I wanted to stay. I wanted to expand it. I wanted a bigger experience of it. And while I agree that for some of you, it might be kind of credulous or incredulous that I was able to manipulate the tree, the branches of the tree from about 20 feet away. I was moving my hand in a way where it was creating a vortex, and every limb on the tree was moving. And then I changed the position. I was waving my hand up and down, imagining the interconnectedness, a cooperative agreement between me and the tree. And the branches began to wave up and down. And then I questioned it. Like, am I really doing this? It's like, because I was acting as if I could do it. And then once I began to question it, it vaporized. I couldn't do it anymore. And then I realized that I did not yet have the belief, I did not have the structure in place in order to do it on command or do it with the full belief that I could do it and can do it. Now, understand that the limits of what we can do or what's possible is only limited by our imagination. If you can imagine it and believe it, then you can achieve it. That comes right from Napoleon Hill in the book. That comes right from Napoleon Hill from the book Think and Grow Rich. But as a consequence, because I had questioned my relationship to energy and knew that there was something greater, I experienced several days of really low energy. Like I could barely stay awake. Now, I might have just tapped out my energy reserves thinking that it was coming from me rather than the energy flowing through me. Now, that's a critical distinction if you've ever done healing or energetic healing on other people. We sometimes make the mistake that the healing is coming from us or from me. And I always refer back to what Christ said about the love of God. He said, I am the chalice, not the drink. And it's like you're being the garden hose. You're the conduit, the channel. And the energy comes from the divine. It comes from the ether and works through you and move you. And you direct your intention with unconditional love. And in reflection, I realized when I was working with the tree that I was using energy from me, my own energy, rather than working cooperatively with the universe. And because our relationship with energy is everything, when I interrupted that relationship, several structures in my life fell away, broke down. I had issues with electronics, which I've declared that I'm no longer having issues with electronics. I'm now working cooperatively with my computer, with the other devices in my life, and that they work for the greater benefit of mankind. And they are an extension of me. They are a tool for me to use, and that they need to be up and running, working all the time. That's one little course correction that I made in as a result of the breakdown that occurred. And again, if you've listened to the podcast episode before this, you'll remember that every time there's a breakdown, on the other side of it is a breakthrough. And the distance between your breakdown and your breakthrough is getting through the going through. And as a consequence of my breakdown of the days where things just weren't working, and I had no energy, and I didn't post any podcast episodes that week. I fell out of communication with my clients, and I just couldn't put two thoughts together in a meaningful way, at least that seemed meaningful. So in reflecting on that, I reconnected to my 30 things that I use to raise my vibration, which you can get at yesdaniel.com/43. And again, the link is going to be in the show notes. But I also reconnected to how I was thinking about energy. How did I and what did I believe about energy? And where were my limitations? And if I'm perfectly honest with you, I think this is going to be one of the bigger breakthroughs I've had in several years. It's already just expanding my awareness and expanding my expression in life in a completely new ways, not completely different, but in many, many new ways. It's a different quality, a different feeling inside. And often when we change, when we transform, the changes inside us, people looking from the outside will say, I don't see anything different. But you interact with the world completely different. You feel different. You perceive things differently. And I know that many of you have found this podcast because you're on the cutting edge of your own discoveries, your own questioning about your spiritual path, about what's possible for your life. And I remember when I first started out, it felt like poking around in the dark. And I was open to anything and everything that would enlighten me. And in a podcast episode coming up, I'll talk about when I created a revolution in 1988. And when I declared a revolution for my life, everything changed. And I had a series of breakdowns in my life. And it ushered in a whole new wave of experience. And when you declare for yourself that you're stepping off into the unknown, that you're interested in knowing who you are and what's possible for your life, unfortunately, and in many ways, there are structures that will fall away. Some of them you didn't want to fall away. You didn't think you wanted them to fall away. But some of the things that happens is relationships end, long-term relationships, friendships come to a head or they dissolve. People leave your life, sometimes in droves. Sometimes people lose their job, lose their livelihood, and have to reinvent themselves, recapitulate themselves to the world. In other times, people develop a health crisis, and they have to create a whole new relationship with their body, their perceptions of health and well-being. And who are they in the world? And this brings me to a point of clarification here, and is really central to my coaching practice now and virtually everything that I do. You see, over the last 30 years in working with over 10,000 people, interacting with 10,000 people on a personal level, what is central to every problem, every situation that a person faces in their life is what is their self-identity, what is their self-concept, and its relationship to reality. What does reality mean to me? Who am I in this big picture? What am I capable of? What's possible for me? You see, all that is central around the idea of who we think we are. And in many times we need to let go of who we thought we were in order to step into who we really are. I think it was Shakespeare. In fact, it was Shakespeare that said, and this could be paraphrased, but it went something like this. You know who you are, but you have no idea who you can possibly be. Now, many of you may have heard me talk about manipulating the weather in the previous podcast, and some of you are somewhat skeptical. And by all means, be skeptical. Just like Buddha said, question everything. Question everything. But the limits of what you can do, the limits of what's possible, are only limited by your imagination. The only reason you haven't really manipulated the weather is perhaps you haven't tried yet. You see, for me, this started as a child where I would lay on my back in the backyard and watch the clouds drift overhead, and I would identify different animals in different shapes. And then I got curious one day if I could manipulate the cloud. Could I change its shape, make it disappear, or alter its form? And just by focusing on it and getting curious about it and wondering what it would be like for it to change, it would change. And so I began developing these little skills in manipulating aspects of my environment. I was once asked in a workshop what I thought the limits of the mind were. And I asked, what are the limits of your consciousness? What's the limits of your imagination? Can you picture the edge of the universe? The moment you can picture the edge of the universe, that's where your mind is. That's where your consciousness is. In my intuition course, I have people practice telepathy, sending thoughts, broadcasting energy, broadcasting thoughts to other people in far-off places to see if they'll call you back or to see if they'll respond to you. And anytime I send energy or suggest that someone else sends energy, I want you to cloak it in love, unconditional love and acceptance, that you just want the best for them, that you're sending them light and love and purity, and that their life is working out in the most amazing way. And then this will get you. If you can take the next step, is do it with people you don't like. Do it with people that have done you wrong. If you can see your humanity in them, that they were just operating from inner needs, inner wants that were self-serving, and you were, as I guess, the unfortunate benefit of the fallout, you can just recognize, and this is a compassion exercise, you recognize the humanity in them and that you send them unconditional love. You don't like them. You don't accept what they did, but you want them to have the best life and a healing if possible, and that you're sending light and love to them. It changes you, possibly more than it changes them. Well, if I was to sum up here, what I wanted you to get out of this podcast is one, that breakdowns are a natural part of living, of growing and moving forward. And that on the other side of every breakdown is a breakthrough. And in between is getting through the going through. Now, that is a repeat of the podcast episode just before this, but I wanted to emphasize, too, that the limits of your creation, the limits of what's possible for your life are only limited by your imagination. And you can do seemingly impossible things that if you can conceive of it and believe it, then you can achieve it. It's all about alignment. Again, what this podcast is all about, aligning your heart with your mind and your spirit in a congruent motion and congruent focus on your life and in your activities. So if you haven't listened to all almost 50 podcast episodes, I invite you to go back to the beginning or go back and search the different topics that might be interesting to you. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, by all means, subscribe. This is going to be a conversation that is continually evolving, and I have no precept or nor preconception of how long I'm going to do this. I can see myself doing this for years. I have so much and so many things to talk about because I want to assist you in creating the best life possible for yourself. You see, this journey for me started out as a very selfish endeavor. I just wanted to be the happiest I could be. I wanted the best life for myself. And as a natural course, I began interacting with people in my life, and they began asking for my advice, questioning. And before I knew it, I was coaching inside bars and over drinks and over lunch or dinner or in casual conversations. Sometimes people would call me out of the blue because they were at the end of their rope. And they felt like they could connect with me and I would have something positive to say, a new way of looking at their situation. And before you make the conclusion that somehow I was part of some preconceived plan on my behalf to be a teacher, to be a change agent, I actually made a declaration when I was 18. When I went to a motivational workshop, seminar, several different speakers were speaking at Ford Auditorium. One of them was Wayne Dyer. He was just getting started. And I came away from that saying, I want to do something like that. I want to motivate, inspire, help people transform their life. I was never the same after that day. It was November 10th, 1979, and I made a new declaration for my future. And then everything in my life began to evolve around fulfilling on that path. And I can look back and see how I was guided, prodded, and pushed into that path or on that path along the way. And it was inevitable once I made the declaration. And then part of that declaration happened in 1988. New Year's, it was actually January 4th, 1988, is when I made a declaration that my life was in a rut and that I was creating a revolution for my life. And then everything changed. Everything set off in a new direction. But that idea that I was in a rut was still born out of that original intention that I wanted to be a teacher, that I wanted to make a difference in the world. And I will do a deeper dive into that whole story around the unfoldment at age 28, my spiritual awakening, because I'm coming up on my birthday, my spiritual birthday, which is September 3rd. And I'll give a lot more attention and provide a lot more detail about what transpired and what happened to wake me up, really wake me up. So if you're curious about the intuition course, by all means, go to yesdaniel.com, click the link. In fact, there, you can even download some other free stuff there, a couple audios, if you just want some freebies. If you want the guide on the 30 things to do to raise your vibration, to reconnect to your energy, that's at yesdaniel.com/43. And with that said, I'm hoping that you got value out of this episode, as I do every episode, because I do them especially for you. And I remind you, if this is your first time here, you are listening to Daniel Denovi. And I'm suggesting you follow your bliss, live your life from inner signals, and live the epic life.